The C64 literally has thousands of games to choose from, and most of the games I cover on my channel are arcade style, suited to quick bursts of play with frantic joystick waggling action. But sometimes you might want to drop the pace a little, and sink some time into something a bit more in-depth and involving. Here's my top 10 picks for spending a little more time with your beige box. One of the first movie tie-in games that really captured the essence of the film it's based on. Ghostbusters is a true classic on the C64. Set up a new franchise in the city with the aim of making serious money by setting traps and busting ghosts. You start off by setting up your franchise, buying your car from a choice of 4, and picking your spook fighting equipment. As a minimum, you'll need traps and ghost bait, while the image intensifier and ghost vacuum make your life much easier during the game. While you drive around the city, catching Slimer over and over again, and hoovering up ghosts, the PK energy slowly rises with each failed capture, and eventually speeds up the game up to its conclusion. The ghosts on the map occasionally congregate to become the Marshmallow Man, and when this happens you have to hammer the B button to drop the ghost bait to stop them demolishing buildings. Without this, you won't manage to make more money than you started with, and your franchise will fail. If you do turn a profit, and the PK energy reaches its peak, you get to face off with Mr. Stay Puft himself, and attempt to put an end to the whole spectral mess in New York is facing. Probably the simplest game here, and some nice touches like the karaoke opening, Ghostbusters is still worth a couple of hours playing, especially at Halloween when you're sick of ghosts and goblins. These days, there's only really one show in town when it comes to football management games. Sports Interactive Football Manager dominates the genre, but this hasn't always been the case. Back in 1998, the market was seeing ever more management games hit the shelves as publishers tried to recreate the success of Kevin Tom's original Football Manager. But the game we're looking at here took a different approach from the wheeling and dealing of the English top flight. Tracksuit Manager sees you take control of either the English national side, with 100 preset players, or another European nation where you can type in your own players' names. You're tasked with reaching European Championships and World Cup finals, and performing accordingly to your nation's expectations. With no transfers, you pick players according to their fitness, morale, and your selected tactics. And unlike many of its peers, the tactics go deeper than just formation, with passing type, marking style, and attacking bias all showing up here, years ahead of its competitors. You can even give individual players instructions and set them as set piece takers. You get to follow your team's progress on the pitch with some great text commentary and an abstract representation of where the ball is during the game. The national newspapers give you 2 different takes on your performance after each game, with typically cutting UK tabloid style headlines the order of the day. At the end of the day, ignore the fact that this is based on national sides, and get immersed in a world of football that still has the Iron Curtain intact, and there's plenty of stars from the mid-80s still plying their trade on the biggest stages in the world. If you're a programmer and manage to have your name forever attached to one of your games, like Chris Sawyer or Sid Meier, then you know you must have had a hit. And so it is with Mike Singleton and Lords of Midnight. A hugely popular game on the 8-bits of the time, this epic turn-based strategy game borrows heavily from the lore of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings to create a bleak and snowy version of the quest to defeat an evil overlord who has summoned great armies in the north. You begin with 4 characters led by Luxor the Moon Prince, and you must recruit the other Lords of Midnight to defend the lands of the free from Doomdark. To defeat him, you must either conquer his citadel in the north, which is an almost impossible task, or use Morkin to find the Ice Crown, the source of Doomdark's power, and destroy it. With no sound and a distinct graphic style that recalls the game's Spectrum roots, you might be forgiven for thinking that this is a bland game. Not worth playing today, but there is still a depth of strategy and sense of tension playing through this, with real pain when characters and armies fall to the enemy overnight, leaving you hoping you can guide Morkin north unnoticed. Each playthrough sees the enemy approach you differently, so it's impossible to simply follow someone else's steps to victory. To get the most out of this, you'll need a map and a list of key commands. No joystick controls are here. If you get sucked in, you'll spend not just hours on this, but days. I was surprised in recent years to find out that Detective was a very popular game, easily making many of the all-time top 100 C64 game lists out there. To me, it was a relatively obscure game that came out on a Zap cover tape that had much more to it than many of the cover tape games that I'd come across at the time. However, in hindsight, it must have struck a chord with so many players that it stuck with them all these years, just as it has with me. At its core, this is an 8-bit homage to the board game Cluedo, or Clue if you're from the US. You control the titular detective who's been sent to a country mansion to investigate the murder of Angus McFungus. You control everything with the joystick and navigate an interface with the fire button to interact with the objects and the other characters. In that sense, it is slightly easier to get to grips with than many of the other keyboard heavy games here. Your immersion is also helped along with memorable character and background designs, perfectly evoking many of the murder mystery tropes of pulpy detective novels. The atmospheric stormy weather effects outside the mansion just up the claustrophobic atmosphere as you race against time to uncover the murderer before you end up a victim yourself. These days, a walkthrough makes this a straightforward finish, but give it a couple of blind goes first to experience the way it's meant to be played. Probably my favourite game that came in a magazine cover tape now, and certainly the one I put the most time into, Johnny Reb 2 sees you commanding an army during the American Civil War in this turn-based strategy game. Current political discourse aside, the choice is yours as to what side you take. However, the default battle isn't simply a case of two identical sides facing off. The Confederates are a much larger force attempting to take a bridge, but suffer from having mostly inexperienced troops. The Union side is smaller and mostly dug in on the opposite side of the river, with more veteran troops and some reinforcements trickling in as the battle progresses. Controlling your troops is fairly easy, with everything going through the joystick. Fire selects troops and allows you to give one of the handful of commands available, like move, fire or dig in. You need to manage each unit's strength, which is effectively the number of troops left, their ammunition and their morale. Troops who take a heavy pounding will rout and try to leave the battle, and are uncontrollable in that state. Supply wagons allow you to resupply your units, handy when you have a few cannons firing away at enemy positions. Once you've handed out your orders, there's real-time playback of the battle unfolding, with some simple but perfectly functional animations, and one of the nice touches here are the craters left behind from cannon fire. Beat the enemy general by scoring more points than them by eliminating their troops. There's also a scenario editor for you to play around with, and change the layout of the next battle entirely. My favourite alteration was to add a ford in the river at the top of the map to allow a flanking cavalry charge, but I'll leave it up to you to get creative with it. The sequel to Top Gun is out soon, but this flying ace simulator doesn't see you screaming around in packs of F-19s like that film. You're out on your own in what was then a top secret stealth fighter. Those guys at Microprose again bring the detail and obsession over authentic experience to the C64 in what I think is the best flight sim on the system. As with most of their games, there's a number of game modes and scenarios within each of these to play through, this time with the goal of progressing through the US Air Force ranks while earning as many medals as possible. 4 theatres of war are available, with America's old 1980s foes Libya, Iran and Russia all featuring. There's ground and air-based missions, reconnaissance and outright target elimination all waiting to be assigned. How much destruction you're permitted to dish out is determined by the level of background war you've selected. In Cold War scenarios, you need to stick to your objectives and complete a surgical strike or gather intel so that you don't cause an international incident. Limited and conventional war allows you to cause havoc with the enemy and get those points towards that promotion. You can take the default loadout for your mission or pick your own weapons and equipment as you see fit, and your plane is kitted out with the latest in radar countering technology, allowing you to slip by the SAM launchers and flat guns pointing your way. There's also 2 ways to maximise your stealthy approaches, flying high at the ceiling to keep out of the way, or the riskier, fuel-guzzling ground skimming. While primitive compared to later flight sims, this has so much detail packed into it, with some glorious end-of-mission screens that it makes sitting through the claustrophobic missions at low frame rates so satisfying. Especially if you can make a better job than me of landing the damn thing. Maybe we'll get to see you and your buddies celebrating in the bar. Draw the curtains and turn off the lights for this one. It's time to dive like Das Boot and head beneath the waves for the sublime submarine simulator. Microprose once again go to extremes to try and recreate the feeling of heading to war, with as much attention to detail and historical accuracy as they can manage to fit into an 8-bit machine. Like most of the war simulators, there's a variety of game modes here with a single set-piece battle, along with entire sea patrols where you'll need to manage your energy and oxygen usage, along with ammo stocks and repairs over multiple engagements. You're the captain of a US submarine in the Pacific Theatre during the Second World War, and thankfully many of the crew tasks have been streamlined for you. You control your heading, man the periscope and fire torpedoes to sink the enemy convoys supplying Japan. There are plenty of options at the start of the game to alter the realism and difficulty. Turning off convoy zigzags, for example, makes most enemy ships sitting ducks as they plough on regardless of your attacks. Can you manage to take out the big targets before the enemy destroyers swamp your position and drop depth charges around you? There will be some tense moments as the ping of sonar hits your hull and you wait to hear how close those splashes from the drops really are. Make it back to shore for medals and some well-deserved shore leave, or end up in Davy Jones' locker forever. It's all down to your command as captain. A rundown of the keys and a quick read of the manual is a must here. There might be a more famous sandbox game that started out on the BBC Micro, but make no mistake, Exile has a massive scale that rivals Elite. Even with a 1991 release relatively late in the C64's lifespan, this hasn't affected its place in the top 100 charts, as this game is well regarded amongst fans today. But what is it that makes this game so engrossing? This isn't just a simple shoot 'em up with some interesting physics. Countless puzzles stand in the way of your task of repairing your ship and escaping from the planet. You explore below the surface of the world through what feels like endless tunnels and caverns, picking up weapons and equipment to help you on your way. Make the most of your teleport system to quickly traverse back to useful spots and try out different items to solve the puzzles that stop your progress. There's plenty of strange life forms to discover in the caves, some of which can be recruited to help you. Maybe you'll repay the favour by taking them with you in your ship. While the controllers themselves can all be utilised through the joystick, it's much easier to learn some of the keyboard shortcuts. And while you're thumbing through the impressive manual that comes with this game, there's also a novella for you to read through to get a flavour of the world behind the story. Even if you don't want to spend the time trying to get through the entirety of this game, it's well worth giving it a go to check out the very impressive physics in it. Few games around this time let you experience gravity and item mass in quite the same way. There's been many successful spacefaring games over the years, but the granddaddy of them all, the genre starter, is Elite. Like Exile, this started out in the BBC Micro, a product of the burgeoning microcomputer programming scene in the UK in the 1980s. It's hard to comprehend these days the impact such a game could have in gaming, but its arrival was truly seismic. Never before had players been able to live out their sci-fi fantasies of flying through distant solar systems and in such an open-ended way. While there is a storyline, it isn't necessary for you to even take part in it if you don't want to. You might not even come across it on your playthrough. You're free to make your fortune in space credits from trading, bounty hunting, piracy or asteroid mining. You'll need to pick up new equipment to help you, and I'd recommend getting the dock computer first, as it's very easy to lose concentration and blow yourself up by heading into the space stations at the wrong angle. You can also upgrade your weapons with new lasers, missiles and smart bombs. And you're going to need those upgrades if you're going to climb the rankings to get to the legendary status, Elite. There are hundreds of planets across multiple galaxies to visit, each with unique economies and demographics. Another game in this list that needs a read of the manual. I recommend practicing docking in the starting system, as you'll get as many tries as you like, and you won't explode if you hit the sides of the station like you would elsewhere. This is a must play for 8-bit fans everywhere. Well, this was always going to be here, wasn't it? There's a good reason that Sid Meier's Pirates topped so many C64 games lists, and that's because even today the idea of setting sail in the Caribbean in the hunt of plunder and glory is still alluring. Microprose have 3 games in this list, and that is no accident. On the C64, they were synonymous with quality, and they crammed their games with as much as they possibly could. Here you pick your starting nation from one of the colonial powers, and set off with a modest crew in a relatively small ship. Once you get going, the new world is your oyster. You can choose to fight any side you like, gaining favours from local governors, you can conquer towns for your chosen nation, attack shipping, or simply make money by trading between ports. There's a storyline where you try and reunite your family who have been captured by notorious rival pirates, which of course you can ignore if you like. You can buy treasure maps from dodgy strangers in the inn, and set off to find out if they're accurate or not. There is so much you can potentially do here, you can find yourself lurching from one playstyle to the next. The big prizes come from raiding the Spanish treasure fleet or silver train, but this takes some forethought, picking up war galleons, plenty of cannons and keeping a large and rowdy crew in check long enough to make a successful raid, all without alerting the locals on your way in during the process. Even each combat has strategy to think about. Do you take the lightly armed but manoeuvrable pinnace up against the galleons to wear them down before your assault, or you just go for the most cannons you can muster? When assaulting a port fortress, do you make your way to shore as quickly as possible, or do you try softening them up first? And when you close quarters and face off against the enemy captains, do you go for a quick victory, or do you take your time to allow your troops to wreak havoc? With so many possibilities, different nations to privateer for, and even time frames to try out, this is a game that can truly swallow hours of your time. So what did you think of the list? Any that don't deserve to be there, Did I miss one of your favourites? Leave a comment and let me know, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more videos in the future.